Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Founder Conversation. Today, we're recording from Athos in COC Berlin. We're slowly making progress to a more professional podcast-style studio. And we're here talking with operators, founders, and people from across the ecosystem here in Europe and Berlin in general, who are building companies and just generally doing something interesting. Today, we're joined by Nathan Williams, founder and CEO of Minespider. Minespider is helping make global supply chains more transparent by tracking provenance of raw materials and helping companies meet increasing demanding sustainability and regulatory requirements, or at least that's my understanding.
That's pretty good.
I'm joined also by Walters, our CEO and founder of Solveri. He's behind the camera at the moment, and he'll be chiming in along the conversation as well. So let's begin with your story, Nathan. Let's start with you. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. What brought you to Berlin, and how did you get started doing what you're doing?
I was born at a very young age. I came to Berlin back in 2013. So I've been here a hot minute, I guess about 13 years. And at the time, Berlin was very different. Yeah. It was seen as a sort of an up-and-coming startup scene, and I was living in Montreal at the time, and I had just gotten my degree, my MBA, and a lot of our friends, my wife and my friends, had moved away. We were ready for a change, and she had visited here on a work trip and fell in love with the city. So I moved here sight unseen. I said, "Good enough, let's go," because I make terrible life choices. And that first arrival at Tegel Airport in 2013, it was gray, it was cold, it was ugly.
What month was that?
Was that February? Okay, 1st of February, yeah, the ideal time. And I was like, what have I gotten myself into? But my goal was to go to every event and shake everyone's hand until I found work. I wasn't even planning on founding a company at the time. And my first job ended up being with the German Startups Association, organizing some events for them. I ended up organizing an event called German Valley Week, where I went with a group of entrepreneurs and the official delegation of the Vice Chancellor of Germany at the time, Philipp Rösler, to San Francisco. And met a bunch of entrepreneurs that way, and was posting online about my adventures and experience. And then some of my contacts who had been following me messaged me and said, "Hey, I've got some needs in a job. I see that you're involved with tech. Can you help me?" And so that was sort of how I got my first gig, that I founded a company to start and sort of built up the skills from there.
I see. One thing led to another.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of luck involved in my story, but also a lot of preparation to be prepared for luck.
And so were you like, you didn't have the intent to start a company when you came to Berlin?
I always sort of had a desire, entrepreneurial desire, but I didn't know where to begin. And so the best place to start when you don't know where to begin is not to do everything at once, but so my intent was to just surround myself with the right people and sort of find my way by getting going. One of my friends a long time ago says you can't steer a parked car. And so better to make some choices, get the thing in gear, and then you'll have a better idea of where you're headed.
Right. So what then originally drew you towards supply chain and raw materials in this industry?
So the first company I founded was in data management. The contact I told you about was working for an oil and gas supplier, and one of the owners of the company stole $12 million from the other owners. Wow. And then bribed KPMG to fake the audit. And so this guy had trust issues, so he knew me, so he asked me to do this job, even though I had no idea what I was doing. And so I got some people and skills in complex data management, and that was just a project. Then my dad contacted me and said, "Well, you know a lot of about this computer stuff," and he was working in regulatory at Michelin at the time, and he was having trouble with some complex areas of his job. So I built a tool for him, and then we tried to turn that into a bigger thing. This was in chemical regulations, and that company didn't really succeed. I ended up selling it to a competitor, but I think that if I was the person back then that I am now, then I would probably have made it succeed, but it was a lot of learning curve. And then from that, it was 2017, and two things happened that year. Number one was that Trump got elected for the first time, or inaugurated rather, and the second was that Bitcoin crossed the $1,000 mark. So everyone was talking about what else you could do with blockchain and this technology other than payment systems. And right at the same time, there was an article in the Washington Post released about how they were concerned the Trump administration would stop enforcing the Dodd-Frank Act, which was all about supply chain. And so I was like, okay, seems to be in my wheelhouse. Let's just talk to some people. And so I started talking to anyone who would speak to me about what had worked, what didn't work, what were the problems in supply chain. I didn't want to do what I had done with the previous company, is just build and then hope to find someone to buy it. I was hoping to start it as maybe a research, find the pain points.
I see.
And it led into a fairly extensive process, and by the end of 2017, I had written one of the first white papers on how to use blockchain for tracking supply chains. It got cited by a couple of industry groups, and that got me on the map of Google, Volkswagen, and Cisco. We did a first project, and the rest is history.
Wow. So let's talk about that specific problem. Most people have never really thought about like where the materials inside their products or their phones come from. Why is this such a difficult problem to solve for traceability?
This is known as a systemic problem.
Yeah.
It's a problem with the entire system, and it's complex, like in the same way that climate change is complex. To know the products, the components, and where they come from in the system, first of all, what do you need to know, right? Knowing that this metal came from this mine and this metal came from this mine is already, it gives you information, but what do you do with that information? The next level might be, well, I know the origins of the metals. Have they passed any audits, any certifications? How do I know that the certifications are correct or are helpful in any way? I get assurance, but how do I know the metadata that actually says that these metals went into it? And then you get into the complexity of it all. In a computer, you'll have so many components, thousands of them, and they'll use microscopic amounts of some of these metals, like tantalum, in their semiconductors. You can't tag them physically. So how do you ensure what you're trying to do? And what you're trying to do is not to track each molecule. What you're trying to do is assure that we're not using forced labor and child labor in our supply chains and in our products. And this is a huge challenge, especially because in a systemic problem, it's a problem the system has. But you can't deal with the system. There's no one in charge of the supply chain. There's only buyers, sellers, and regulators.
And so who actually suffers then from the lack of transparency?
You just asked the million-dollar question. Who really suffers? And how much do we care? Yeah. At the end of the day, the hard truth is that for an OEM, like the OEM has the most power in the supply chain, the automobile manufacturer, the electronics manufacturer, but for them to care, the customer has to care. You and I have to care. But for us to care, our decisions have to make a difference. Right. If I'm going to make a decision between laptop A and laptop B, I have to know that laptop A is somewhat better than laptop B, and that I can make a distinction. But if I sort of feel that both are going to be about the same, then what choice do I have if I want a laptop?
Price or
exactly.
marketing.
So I can't make a decision based on what I don't track. But even if I track it, if everything is roughly the same, then I still don't have power. I'm choosing between two sort of problematic products.
So consumers want to make good decisions, but there's just no means for them to really have transparency.
Well, it's similar to the problem of climate change, right? I always like likening it to that because we have a lot more exposure to it. You can choose to have a lower carbon emitting product, but if you reduce your entire lifetime carbon emissions to zero, you'll save less than 1 second of global emissions. So
that's like a drop in the bucket.
It's a drop in the bucket, and then you look at Taylor Swift taking her private jet and emitting the, and you go, well, I'm glad I didn't use a plastic straw.
Right, that one time.
Exactly. This is a problem that requires many things working in tandem to solve. And so for us, part of it is regulation, part of it, but also regulators, right? Regulators don't want to make a law that is impossible for companies to meet, because then companies just won't meet it and it would be a failure and it's impossible to enforce. So you need a combination of a solution that'll work, the ability to, regulation to push it forward, the ability to sell it to individual companies and meet their individual needs. That's the other piece of it. And all of this has to work together. And the good news is that you get we're seeing momentum, right? We're seeing momentum in some of these areas that's positive. But like, imagine going to a VC and saying, well, my startup is the climate change solution. No, it's not. There's no solution, no singular
problem,
solution.
right?
Like, who's your customer? Yeah. My customer is anyone. Oh no, that's not going to work. Like, who you solve? Anyone who has problems with climate change. No, you can solve a specific slice of the solution to climate change that affects a certain slice of customer. You sell maybe carbon accounting software, or maybe you're selling carbon reducing products or things that contribute to the overall solution. And the thing is, supply chain is actually the same. Supply chain transparency is a systemic problem. You can sell slices of it to people and make it part of the overall solution. But we don't tend to see it that way because we haven't had as much exposure to supply chain as an issue.
Fascinating. So then let's talk about Minespider specifically. For someone who's hearing about it for the first time, maybe you can explain what the company does and what exactly is that slice that you're trying to solve a solution for.
Yeah, so we're a tech company. We started as with a methodology for tracking products as they go through the supply chain. And we've changed a little bit over time. Now I'd say we can still do that, but we're less about the whole supply chain and much more about what we call digital product passports. Now when we started, this wasn't a term. It was a term that we started using quite early. I don't say we, more like I stole it. There were some people who had talked about digital product passports, but it wasn't well defined. It still isn't well defined, to be honest. So we started using it and defining it in a way that we felt made sense. And for us, a digital product passport is a encrypted digital record of a product, like a very, very fancy packing slip, where you have a mixture of human-readable PDFs and machine-readable data points that are encrypted, and you can give permission to access to different players as needed, without necessarily knowing in advance who they are going to be. And you can then put a identifier, like a QR code, on a product to be able to give access to that digital record.
I see. So those are DPPs.
We call those DPPs.
On your website, you also have something called DBPs.
Yeah, it's sort of like a whale is an animal, but not all animals are whales. DBP is a battery passport, digital battery passport.
Specific for batteries.
It's specific for batteries, which is a type of digital product passport.
I see.
So I think the burning question that anyone's having here who's listening, so how does this lead us into the topic of blockchain? So why does the blockchain come into play here? Because at least to me, my first feeling is this can be just stored by some company and then exposed through some API. So why blockchain?
Evolution. So in the beginning, the reason people were interested in blockchain as a solution was largely because of superficial views as to how the technology worked. Blockchain allows you to make a long transaction list of transactions between parties without having a central bank in keeping a universal record. It allows everyone who's a member of the system to keep their own record. And so you can track flows of money, for example. And people were asking, well, what else can we do with something so revolutionary that we don't actually need that centralized bank to keep track of flows of money? Well, what about flows of goods, right? And so because it mimics, at least on a superficial level, the same types of product flows, right? So product flows from mine to smelter to trader to manufacturer to customer in a similar way as money would flow from Alice to Bob to Charlie. And the problem with it is that there's a lot of detailed differences between supply chain and finance. And I can go into those if you want, but some of them are that finance is purely digital, but as soon as you touch the physical world, you've got a physical product that moves and then a digital product that moves, and they're not always in sync. There's problems with the blockchain that if you send a token, for example, to the wrong address, it is gone forever. You don't want that to happen with your blockchain if it's for supply chain, because you still have the physical good. If you're dealing with large companies, the incentives don't necessarily line up. The technical people that might understand the blockchain are not the ones who are going to work with the physical good because they're in a warehouse. So there's a lot of things that didn't quite line up. Which is one of the reasons why we changed to this DPP system, digital passport, where it's much simpler for the people actually using it. However, we still use blockchain, right? So at the end of the day, what's going on now, there's sort of two elements of blockchain. One is the ability to tokenize, to create a digital cryptocurrency-like token that represents a physical good. That is wonderful if you have a good that doesn't change but needs to be traded a lot, okay? So like you can imagine a scenario where you've got, say, a ton of gold and you put it under a mountain and then you create a digital ton of gold and it's never gonna change, and so then you can trade it, and that's a lot more efficient than lugging gold around, right? So that's a very good use case for sort of pure blockchain tokenization. The other element of blockchain is the immutability element, because once you put something in the blockchain, if everyone has a copy of it, if I change my data, it will change only my copy of it, and because everyone else has a copy, they can verify that the data is changed or whether it's unchanged. This gives an immutability. This is super useful if you have a risk of fraud. This is very, very common in supply chains. So if you're worried that someone might keep two sets of records, if someone might not report the grade of their material correctly, things like that. And so that's the element that we have preserved. We've stopped using the tokenization element of it because there are very few things in supply chain that don't undergo transformation. So if you get rocks out of the ground, they become metal and concentrate, then metal, then component at every stage of the supply chain. Right now, most of our software resembles more closely an enterprise tech stack or an enterprise software, and blockchain is involved in that tech stack as an immutability layer, which is very helpful in places where you have this type of fraud.
So let's talk a bit about your founder journey with Minespider. I mean, you went into it briefly, but how did it officially begin, and what were those early years like when you started?
I'll tell you, the first year was an interesting challenge, because in 2017 we didn't have ChatGPT, and we had an issue.
I can barely imagine a world like that.
I know, right? Like at the time, the question is, if you have to learn something arcane, complex, new, and not well documented, how do you learn it? And the answer is from other people that are involved in the field. So I had two main areas to learn back in 2017 when we started this journey. Number one was how supply chain policy works. And to do that, what I did is I cold emailed everybody who was in that Washington Post article about the concerns of the industry of the enforcement of Dodd-Frank. There were a lot of people who were quoted and interviewed, and I would just cold emailed them and said, so I'm working on this tech project of what's been done, what works, what didn't work, etc. And through that I got invited to some meetings at the OECD, I got at the World Economic Forum, at the UN, to discuss these challenges, because there aren't a huge number of people that know about these challenges, so they're always eager to expand the circle. Now, the second side of this was how to design a blockchain system. Now, my background is in software architecture. I'm not an engineer. I don't have a lot of background in actually building these things. It's more architecting the systems.
I see.
So I know enough to get myself in trouble, and then I rely on other people to get me out of it. And so I didn't know a lot about the details of how to actually build a blockchain system. So my first thought is I can't afford to hire someone, so I have to talk to people who've done it before. But if you call the CEO of a blockchain company that's fairly successful and say, why did you build your system this way? How did you design it? And because I want to build my own.
They're not exactly forthcoming.
No, they're going to hang up. And so I started a podcast, and it was called Analysis in Chains, and I started it in 2017 with a friend of mine. And we started just by researching different cryptocurrencies and blockchains and posting about what we learned and sort of build in public sort of thing. And then we got approached by a few companies that wanted to be interviewed for our show. And so then
They approached you.
They approached us.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone at the time was doing an ICO, and so they wanted to promote their token sales. And and I was happy to talk to them. So I could ask them any question I wanted.
That's a great opportunity.
Oh yeah, everyone wants fame. And so I interviewed about 80 founders over the course of 2 years from 2017 to 2019. When I ran it. I stopped running it at that point because I sort of ran out of time and I was getting diminishing returns. The excitement around blockchain was a bit less.
Yeah.
It was never super popular. We had about 2,000 listeners at our peak per episode, but it was a wonderful experience. And I actually met my co-founders from doing these recordings. They listened to it, and also I ran in-person recordings and events, and that's how they met me. And I think the most famous person I ever interviewed was Sam Bankman-Fried. We ended up talking about the how to attract corporate money into cryptocurrency and the importance of trust.
Somewhat ironic.
This was before he was arrested.
For those who might be listening and don't actually know who SMB is, because those people do exist, can you give us a little bit of rundown on what happened?
Oh, he's a guy who stole $30 billion from rich people, and openly had a channel, a Slack channel in his company.
That was actually a Discord channel, but yes, same thing.
Well, Discord, yeah. But anyway, yeah, he was rather notorious. He's basically the Bernie Madoff of cryptocurrency. Massive fraud, and he'll be in jail for the rest of his life.
Wow. So, was there a lot of skepticism when you started off, or just general enthusiasm for the product and your business?
Generally enthusiasm, but I think that if I had to say anything that's sort of my strength and my weakness at the same time, it would be the fact that I wanted to do it right. We never actually did a token sale. I was going to, but then I realized that the incentives didn't really line up with what I wanted to do. I had this idea of that if we launched a token and then one product passport was one token or one track was one token, then you could end up having a system where suppliers of data get tokens in return for doing the work and getting data, and then the downstream, like the electronics and the automotive companies, would use tokens to buy that data. And that sounds like it's good, but for it to really work for investors and people to do a token sale, first of all, it needs to have a 10x return, something like that, very, very quickly. Number one, that means the cost of traceability goes up a lot, which is sort of counter to what you want. You want more people to use it. Right. And then the second thing is that it has to go up very quickly, which means you need massive adoption. Since 2017, the only real success stories we've seen in cryptocurrency have been cryptos that are finance related, because they're all digital. You know,
there's no physical product.
It's I use my crypto for your crypto. As soon as you get into physical products, you're talking about year-long sales cycles, and that's way too slow for a crypto investor.
Right. What surprised you the most in this founder journey?
It's funny, when things start to work, that surprises me, because as a founder, you only see problems. Yeah. And I remember reading a book on entrepreneurship once saying that business is problems. If there were no problems, there would be no business. And so, for me, it's always have backup plans on backup plans on backup plans on backup plans on backup plans, so that that no single thing going wrong.
Redundancy
Completely
built into everything you do.
Exactly. You got to have redundancy.
That's good advice. What about mistakes that you made along the way?
One of the biggest mistakes I think you can really avoid going forward, it's trusting too much of the business to someone who's an employee and not checking in enough.
I see.
Right? So especially someone that is more senior. I've had much more success with junior employees. Now that's not always the case, but with junior employees I tend to be a little bit closer to them and build them up a little more, whereas with
There's more of a mentorship aspect to it. Yeah.
Exactly. And so with a senior employee, when they come in, oftentimes they will take a chunk of the business, especially something that I don't know how to do myself. Now, this was a big problem back in the pre-ChatGPT days, where it was harder to get sort of a foothold on a task that you don't necessarily know. But you should never have a core function of your business be a black box to you.
Right.
Because if someone else even if they're senior, is running that black box, you don't have a way of knowing if they're doing a good job or not. And some of the biggest problems I had were sort of chasing down issues in the company that were started because someone new joined, but rather than, it was hard to pin it down that that person was the problem.
Can you share a little bit about more? Maybe it's a business secret, but like any concrete examles, when exactly did this happen? Where you had some specific chunk, and what that specific chunk was?
So, for example, like we started as a metals tracing business, right? But we saw that there was a big opportunity in batteries because the EU has a battery regulation that requires digital passports on batteries, and that's why we separated it out on the website. By 2027. So by next year, companies have to have it or they can't sell batteries in Europe. End of story. So that's why this year has been a great year for us, and every year prior has been let's wait till next year and see what happens.
Now the floodgates are open.
Exactly. But when we got started, no one in my company had experience in the battery industry. And so, and we didn't need to know how to manufacture batteries, but we needed to know their pain points. Like, how do they make decisions? How does the actual process work? How do we make an integration? Like, even something like what do the main software systems look like in a typical battery company? Are 80% of them on SAP? Like, how does it work? And so we hired someone senior who had done software projects at a fairly large battery company to lead some of our battery project work. And immediately we started running into problems. There were some good things that came out of that. There was a lot of push to have a sort of a more usable product and a better front end for the people who were using it. But I think the biggest issue was that this person didn't actually know their job, and I didn't have a way of verifying that they didn't know their job. And I found out because I gave this person a task to create pricing for this that would fit with the battery industry, and to make sure that what we were doing was in line with the battery regulation. And I found out because one of my other employees came to me and said, hey, this guy came to me and asked me, what's the battery regulation?
That's a red flag.
A little bit of a red flag, but how can you know that if you don't have this feedback coming in, right?
By the way, do you guys work on-prem, or are you guys all working mostly remotely?
We're 100% remote. Back in 2019, right before COVID hit, we had an office here in Berlin. 2020 came around, we got rid of the office entirely, and then half the team moved to Portugal. And I'm not getting them back. So.
It's like everyone who looks to come to Europe.
Exactly. Well, now you can say that the weather is here, just like in Portugal, at least.
Yeah, exactly. It's perfect now, but it's worked for us. It's been a trade-off, though. But I think, honestly, there's one thing that the AI boom has really done well for our company, and that is it has given me a position where I can understand everything going on in the company not to an expert level, not to take over, but to at least know what's going on and to contribute to it, right? So I've sort of clawed my way back into the driver's seat. And that in itself is super helpful. Like, AI doesn't solve all your problems. It's not going to replace all the employees. It'll hallucinate if you give it tasks that aren't well documented. But for anything that is like a well-documented process, it can summarize, it can make workflows, it can help you
wrap your head around
something so that you're not just trusting a black box. And so you can start to approach business with a 10-80-10 rule, right? Like, so you can say, okay, 10% is going to be, I'm going to structure a task of what I want done and verify it with the person, then they do 80%, that's the work, and then I can sign off at the end and make sure it's done and fits in with everything else in the company. And that is a much more controllable way of running a remote business anyway.
Than just throwing something to an employee and hoping that
then hoping it works out.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I fully agree with you there. Like, the whole issue of being able to verify other people's work is extremely complicated. I'm a business owner myself, and I'm lucky enough that my business is currently small enough, but that's, fingers crossed, that's going to change as things go on. And we, like right now with this interview that we're running, we're going to be handing off a lot of this work to an editor across seas. How much of it is he going to outsource to other points? How much of it is he going to do himself? How much of his creative process is actually going to go in there? I don't know. A lot of it is going to be trust.
Yeah. The other thing is that there were pieces of the business that are so, my business especially, that are actually so complicated that if I go into them, then I lose sight of where we're going as a business.
Yeah. You got to keep your eye on the big picture.
Like regulations. Yeah. That's super detailed. And there are experts and career level experts in this for a reason. And the advantage of having these AI tools now is that I don't need to become an expert. I just need to have a high-level summary. And this is something where I can start to get that summary, talk about it, set the direction for the product, but then have the most important details filled in by the subject matter experts. And it gives a lot more control back to the company owner.
Yeah, that's fascinating. The next topic I wanted to discuss was AI and how it affected your business, but we're kind of leading into that now. Do you think that it's fundamentally changing supply chains as well?
Oh yeah, it's changing everything. So we're still in the early days. We haven't seen it massively impact supply chains yet, but it absolutely will. So let's start with this. I think that one of the big changes that I've gone through has been to stop thinking of Google search as my primary way that people are going to find me, right? So all of my customers, battery customers, mining customers, they don't exist in a community where they talk to each other about what solutions to use. They're doing their work in their offices and they're using ChatGPT and asking them, what do I have to do about battery regulation? What do I have to do about this and that? And so they're doing that for everything. Right? So I'm sure that companies are still using procurement platforms, but increasingly to make these comparisons of price and to know who I'm going to get as a supplier, they're going to be using more and more AI tools, and they're already doing it. Everyone says they hate ChatGPT and it'll hallucinate, and then they use it on the side. It's a love-hate relationship. It's not cool to like it, but everyone's using it. And I think that, so number one is, if you're going to be marketing a product, any type of product, you should be marketing it to AI agents. And so what I did in order to be part of that is I've actually built up a whole structure in my website to market to AI agents to make it easier. I actually built a regulatory glossary with 300 different terms that are officially defined in regulations and compared them, like if there's 2 different definitions and 2 different regulations, compare them, but structure it so that an AI can read it. Interesting. And so that way anyone searching for this AI will pick up on it and have a reference back to the glossary, right? And so these are things that you start to do in order to get AI interested. Now, when this starts to hit supply chain, what you're talking about is people marketing their metals, their components to AIs, where AI-driven marketplaces where you have automatic matchmaking and comparisons. One of the things that I did just a couple of weeks ago was I started writing, it hasn't been released yet, but writing a process and a white paper for how two AI agents can compare and trade data without actually giving each other the data in order to and know that the data is fit for their purpose.
Right.
And this is the type of thing that is going to become increasingly common as I rely less on just a ChatGPT chat window and more a AI personal assistant to support my research, my buying, my selling, and my marketing.
You've worked with some massive organizations, Google, Volkswagen, major mining companies. How have you found it different selling to these enterprises compared to selling to startups?
I think that the sweet spot is neither the startup nor the giant company, although they both have their quirks. I think my sweet spot is in the medium-sized companies that are between 50 and 500 employees.
Why is that?
They make decisions much more quickly. They have far fewer processes. They need more help, but they also have money.
Yeah.
And the startups tend to be on the we can make quick decisions but have no money side, and the big enterprises will take 2 years to make a decision, even though they have an obligation starting tomorrow.
So what advice then would you give founders who are looking to enter a very heavy regulated industry like this?
I think that for a very heavily regulated industry, or rather a industry that relies heavily on regulations, I think there's a difference there. Number one, know your niche. Number two, pick a very narrow pain point. Don't do what I did and start wide and then go narrow. Start narrow and then expand from there. And know your customer base. If you're going after the big enterprise companies, the proper way usually is to start with an accelerator program that the big corporate investment company and corporate investment fund will run, because that will make quicker decisions than just going to the front door of a company, unless you already have a contact there. That can make a decision with their budget that doesn't necessarily have to involve legal and tech and blah, 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 blah. If you are going the big enterprise platform route, make sure that you fund appropriately for it, because the sales cycles can be much, much longer.
While we're on the topic of regulations, do you think that they actually create innovation, or are they simply creating more work, the regulations?
Well, I have a very nuanced view of this. Yeah. I think that there's a regulation is just a rule, right? Big companies love regulation. The reason they love regulation is because they've got first of all, it's in their favor. They've got the manpower and the finance to be able to comply. But what it does is it tells them what they have to do. If there's no regulation for something, then the company is in a gray area. Yeah. Did I do right? Did I not do right? Etc. If they end up in the news next to child slaves, then they go, well, whoops, I followed all of the things.
No one told me about this.
The no one told me about this does not fly with public perception. Right. But I'm following all of the things gives you someone to blame. Now, that's not a good thing. But it sort of shows a picture of what regulation is. Does it drive innovation? I think in a way, yes, but it's slow, right? It's a system problem. So the regulators don't want to to dictate what companies should do and prescribe it if it's not the right thing to do. Right? And so what they will often do is they'll make framework regulations. So it's like they'll say things like you have to have a digital product passport, but then they don't define that. Because it's not clear what approach to DPPs is going to work. And they want to see
leave that up
something.
To the industry
they want to leave that up to the industry. Then when there is a clear winner or a clear direction, then they codify it. And this is actually the right way of doing it. Right? I think that no one would adopt DPPs if there wasn't regulation. Like we were treated as a science experiment for the first several years of our operational life, and it was only the most experimental and forward-thinking companies that wanted to work with us. But even they had trouble selling us to their board, right? Billion-dollar companies had trouble scraping together a 10,000 euro budget. And whereas today it's different. There's an actual market. We see standard pricing emerging where people know what to expect. And so once the market emerges, you can see the difference.
What about the EU AI Act that's now appearing? How has that impacted your business?
Yeah, I was about to ask that. Do you think Europe is getting regulation right?
Like I said, every regulation hurts startups more than it hurts bigger companies, right? To be honest, I haven't looked too in depth at the AI Act yet because I have a lot of other regulations that we're dealing with. And AI is not yet the core product of our business. We are incorporating it. I just debuted our regulatory AI that we're building called Reggie just last week. And it got a lot of attention, to be honest. It was even bigger than our digital product passports. Like I got people just emailing me like the same day. Because what we did is we basically took about 200 different regulatory sources, regulations, just ingested them into this ChatGPT-like environment, put a Hermes agent behind it, and now we can serve up document checklists, tell you if you're going from here to there, shipping a product, the type of product, what regulations you have to comply with, what documentation you need, help you filling it out, putting it into the digital product passport directly so that you've got a digital version of it. And so people are really interested in that. But it's still in sort of the alpha testing phase. So we haven't quite gotten to the point where I'm worried about it. That said, I remember back in the days when we were thinking of doing a token sale with cryptocurrency, we never ended up doing. And someone told me once, you want what you're doing to fit in a box. You want it to have a regulation behind you. If you say we're half of this, we're half a cryptocurrency utility token and half a security token, and people don't know what box to put you in, you're in for a nightmare. If you can say, well, there's this old law from the 1700s and we actually fit under that, even though we're a new technology, then people can say, okay, I can put you in a box and then you've got a framework, you give us this, this, and this, and you're good to go. And that, I think, is the right way to think about regulations. I don't see it as necessarily stifling innovation, especially in the era of AI, where you can just, where even a new startup can go, okay, there's a new AI Act, what do I have to do? And, I'm sorry, but if you can't take 5 minutes in ChatGPT and say, okay, spit me out at least a few things to start with, then what are you doing?
Yeah.
So you're thinking of it as more of a context tool, like it gives context to your product, like the AI Act. It is here pretty much already, like it's going to be enforceable this year. And the product that you're building right now, which is in alpha stage, you are not thinking of it as an issue. You're thinking that whatever product you push out to the market, you will do your research, you will know to put it in this box, and you will say it'll fit in that box, and then that means your product will have more credibility because you will say, I fit in this box properly.
I think that the only things that are going to matter going forward for adding value to a company is certifications, hardware, and proprietary data. The value of pure software on its own is going to go down and down towards zero. And so if someone is building out a product, an AI product, and they're worried that a regulation is going to get in their way, they're not building a serious business. If you want to build a serious business, it should just conform to the requirements. And it's not, an impossible task, but that actually is part of your moat. If it costs you $500,000 to get that certification, that's a $500,000 moat that maybe 5 other startups can't cross because they don't have a concrete enough idea to raise the money to do it. So I don't see it as a bad thing, you know?
How do you balance compliance with usability?
I mean, I don't see those as necessarily in conflict either, right? Like, I think that a good service will be complex underneath the hood and handle the compliance so that the user doesn't have to think about it. You know, like, no one wants to think about compliance. And if you're like me, if your primary use case is for the software is compliance, like complying with the EU battery regulation, for example, then oftentimes your customers are going to be confused, lost, needing help, and so it should make it as easy as possible. So that's your value add.
Yeah, so wanted to go back to our initial conversation about sustainability. It seems that there's a lot of growing pressure on companies to understand exactly where their products come from. I mean, as a consumer, how do you think that most consumers out there genuinely care about this as an issue? And
let me deconstruct something here. Let me deconstruct something. What do we mean by care? Right? Do we like, if we talk about consumers caring as, if I had the choice between a sustainable product and a terrible product, and one of them obviously used slaves, one of them was obviously better, and they both cost the same price, then clearly people would choose the better product.
But you said a very important key phrase there, the cost.
And both cost the same price. If there was a little difference, then some people would choose the better product, and if there was a large difference, then a few people would choose the better product, and if there was a large enough difference, then nobody would. Because at the end of the day, I've got certain priorities according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and number one thing here in my choice is that I've got to feed my family. And
keep a roof over my head.
I got to have a roof over my head. And so the biggest barrier to choosing these better products is wealth inequality. Because as wealth inequality increases, more and more people are concerned more and more about the higher price, and they're going to make decisions based on that. And this is basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So, you know, and I think that this aspect of it, of the fact that we've got a trillionaire in the world as of today.
Is he still a trillionaire? Or now he's a trillionaire again?
Well, I have no idea. I try not to think about it day to day. But the very fact that this was ever a thing is probably the root cause of a lot of these issues. It's hard for people to care if the number one thing that they're cared about is whether this coffee costs 10 cents less than this coffee, right? Because that'll let me get my budget a little further.
So is it fair to say that in this case, it's not more about people caring, but it's more about people just being put in situations where they don't really have a choice anymore? Like there's tons of people out there that they really just can only choose the cheapest option they can choose, because otherwise they cannot function normally anymore.
Well, exactly. Caring in a general sense is a function of prioritization. And I might have an emotional attachment to, you know, one or other values, and I might have a certain amount of aversion, what's the word, cognitive dissonance, if I choose something that's against my values. However, one of the values that we don't want to admit to is that we value satisfying our needs and the needs of our family. So this is part of what it is. And so if I'm going to prioritize if I'm going to make a decision between someone far away 20 steps before me in the supply chain that I've never met, that is sort of a statistic in my mind, versus that I don't have control over, versus something I do have control over, which is feeding my family properly and making sure my budget gets us to the end of the month, I know what I'm choosing, right? And it's not about, am I a good person? It's not about, do I care? It's about the fundamental reality of the system, the economic system that we're in.
So then, I'm pretty sure Byron would have asked something similar along the lines, but I'm going to ask it since I started the question as well. So the digital passport that shows the product is, you know, it has, the supply chain is like very clean, like the sustainability metrics are there and they have been measured and approved. So in the end, who is that passport for? Who is the person that actually has to have the capacity to care, the time and money to care, and then actually look at that passport and then care about it? Who are the people who actually need to look at this passport and care about it then?
Well, you've hit on let me take a step back here. You've hit on one of the biggest stumbling blocks to the growth of this industry. And the reason that regulators are needed and regulation is needed in order to push this forward. Because companies and people in companies care when it affects their relationship with their customers. Yeah. And the companies downstream care about their upstream suppliers when it affects their stock price. And so all of this comes together with a regulator that cares that they're setting a standard for their society. And so, the regulators do need to come in at that point and push this forward. Now, that said, who uses our passport? Our passport is designed with the school of thought that the data is in control of the seller. So you can imagine there's sort of two ways to approach supply chain transparency, about DPPs, that you could either pull data out of your supply chain and say, okay, I'm going to send questionnaires to my suppliers, their suppliers, and pull this data forward. Or you can approach it from the other direction and say, well, I've got this data about my processes and I'm proud of my products. I'm going to put it into this digital passport and push it forward. And with that said, I don't think ESG and sustainability is a strong enough case to make a huge difference in the systemic problem. I think it needs to ride on the back of something a little bit more salient to companies, which is efficiency. And so that's part of the reason why right now, companies are adopting this primarily in batteries because they've got a regulatory need. Yeah. And that's going to completely change everything like they just lose access to the market. So that's dollars and cents, right? Or euros and centimes. And but where I see this going forward by say 2028, 2030 is if you've got the ability to put sustainability documents in a digital passport, you have the ability to put trade documents. And most trade today still operates in many areas of the world on paper. This saves you a pile of money. This saves days of transit. This saves a lot of compliance cost. As well, knowing what documents you need, because every location you're sending to has different requirements depending on the product. You send explosive things, it's going to require different documents and different checks. You send waste documents or waste products, it's going to require different documents. And every country has their own peculiarities. So this is something. Third, as company processes become more and more automated, as they start to use automated robots that are going to be in warehouses, as they start to use AI agents making decisions on products, they are going to need data associated with those products. And any product that doesn't have a digital record of data and digital passport is going to be invisible to that market. Right. And so this is the main driver that I see that I don't think is very common in the industry yet, but right now, most AI agents have to look online and search the web and look at public databases for products. But that'll be about maybe model types. That'll be about product classes. That's not going to be about this product in front of you. Mm-hmm. And so if you've got a QR code on, say, a motor, and that QR code leads you to data that says how often that motor has been worked on and what maintenance has been done and what warranty it's under and how to recycle this particular one, and et cetera, that's very powerful for enabling different industrial AI agents to be able to make decisions on what to do with that product.
Is it fair to say that the achievable gold standard that we should be aiming for here is creating these systems so that essentially it has to be governments then, like governments and country leaders who then will say, okay, we now have the tools, we now have the digitization of these things that we want to regulate. Thus, these governments would then have to say to businesses, hey, we are now going to set more compliance rules. We now have the technology to make this manageable. You will not have to need to produce tons of paper. You will actually be able to do this in a somewhat manageable way with your IT infrastructure. So thus, the governments can then actually realistically start saying to businesses, you have to be more sustainable, you have to get your supply chain in order, you have to comply, and by complying, you have to produce these digital artifacts to us. And thus, in the end, it will be the governments that will then actually push all of these systems to become actually, more sustainable and more better for humans and humanity as a whole. Is that fair to say? That's the achievable gold standard in this case.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair, but it's, of course, the devil's in the details, and it's more nuanced than that. The top-down government approach, I find everyone sort of expects, but doesn't work completely. The reason it doesn't work completely is that government doesn't know necessarily what the actual way to do that is, right? They might recognize when technology exists and when there's a clear path forward, but they're not going to say, hey, everyone use Minespider. Yeah. Right? They don't want to pick a winner that way. And as soon as you do that, you're a public good. And so then you're either regulated very heavily or you get taken over as a public service or something like that. I think the reality of something as complex as this is that governments have to be the driving force, but then it has to follow in tandem with industry adoption. So the industry usually will have groups come together from different competing companies, like maybe at the World Economic Forum is a popular one, or maybe the UN steps in, or maybe industry groups like the battery associations or whatever will come in and say, well, we think that it should be done in this way so that we can achieve government goals without sacrificing our businesses along the way, because no one wants an economic collapse, right? Government doesn't want that either. It's not just about safety, it's also about making sure that people have a good standard of living in a society to live in. So yes, and it's a tangled path to get there.
So looking forward, if we were sitting in the same room in 2030, what do you think we would be talking about?
Oh, we'd be sitting, hopefully, on my yacht that floats in the swimming pool of a bigger yacht.
We would love to visit you on your yacht.
Oh yeah, me too. Me too. They say if it floats or flies, it's cheaper to rent. No, in 2030, I think that what we would be talking about is how much what we foresaw back in 2026 came to pass, right? How fast it was, and I think that it's inevitable that we're going to see more automation. I think that from the regulation standpoint, that at least in Europe, that's pretty clear. Next year's batteries. The year after that is going to be the eco-design regulation, which is going to cover most. It covers a set of products, and then over time will cover most products sold in Europe. So by 2030, even toys are going to have a digital passport showing their history, showing their safety records, things like that. And what I'm already seeing is that other countries are adopting and following suit. So China already has a battery passport regulation similar to Europe's. India is making their own. There's not an official mandate in North America yet, in USA or
they'll get there maybe.
Canada, but they're going to get there because even if it's not about ESG, it can be about tariffs. It can be about what the location of origin is.
And at some point it'll be about their bottom line.
It's about bottom line, exactly. I mean, in the US, you have already a need for it, even if it doesn't spell out digital product passport or traceability. You have things like the Uyghur Forced Labor Act, which was written by Republicans. And it was Marco Rubio who put it in, which says we don't want products that have come from the Xinjiang province in China and have been subject to forced labor. What his motivation behind that is an open question, whether it was pure humanity or whether it was a competition with China. Either way, what it shows is that these sorts of initiatives are not linked to a left or right side of the political spectrum ideology, but rather it's more about being able to control what is coming into a country, what is being sold to consumers,
Sovereignty.
and you can't control what you don't track.
Yeah, yeah, traceability. So what worries you about the future?
Everything boils down to wealth inequality, seriously. Whether it's climate change, whether it's ability to make good decisions, whether it's the rise of political groups that don't want me in the country or don't want other people in the country, it all stems down to a fact that people don't have a means of getting ahead, and I worry for my child and what world they'll grow up in. Climate change, what that's going to look like, whether it's going to lead to more conflict. There's a lot, and I can't solve it all.
Yeah.
I hope that I'm a force for good.
But you can solve a slice of
And
that pie.
I hope that I can solve a slice, or at least address a slice and have other people use that to solve it. But yeah, there's a lot to worry about. But you got to keep going. And at very least, I know that in my work, I've got control over a piece of it, and that keeps me going forward instead of constantly just worrying about what I have no control over.
All right, so on that note, I think we'll wrap it up. It's been really fascinating having you here and speaking with you and talking with you about these problems that are going to be relevant for everybody going forward. And yeah, for anybody else that's listening and is interested in learning more about Minespider, we'll include links in the description of the video once we post it. I personally just really enjoyed the conversation, learning a bit more about the industry, something that I don't have a background in. And yeah, for anyone listening, please don't forget to follow along as we continue speaking with founders, builders, and other interesting people from the Berlin ecosystem. Nathan, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Byron.
It's been a pleasure.